Hi, I'm Kat. I'm an ADHD organizing specialist and coach, and I work primarily with women who feel overwhelmed by their homes and honestly, by their lives. And one of the most common things I hear, usually said quietly, is, I think I might be a hoarder. And every time someone says that to me, there's shame attached to it, like they're confessing to something really bad. I remember one client in particular. She sat across from me and said, I don't want you to judge me, but I think I'm a hoarder. And when I asked her what made her think that, she didn't describe the emotional attachment to everything. She didn't describe panic at the idea of letting things go. She described something else. She described trying over and over, buying planners, starting new systems, reorganizing on the weekends, decluttering in bursts of motivation, and then falling behind again. She wasn't holding on to things because she felt emotionally bonded to them. She was exhausted and she felt like she kept failing. That's a very different experience. Because here's the thing. From the outside, clutter can look the same. A full kitchen counter, stacks of paper, rooms that feel overwhelming. But the reason behind the clutter matters because the reason determines the solution. There is a difference between hoarding disorder, chronic disorganization, and situational life chaos. And when we lump them all together under the word hoarding, we create more shame than clarity. Here's a gentle starting point. Hoarding disorder is primarily about emotional attachment and distress around discarding. Chronic disorganization is usually about executive function challenges and systems that haven't worked long term. One says, I can't let this go. The other says, I don't know how to manage this. That difference matters a lot. And I want to say this clearly. Struggling with clutter does not mean you're lazy. It also doesn't mean you lack discipline. And it does not automatically mean you have a hoarding disorder. Sometimes it means your brain needs different systems. Sometimes it just means you're overwhelmed. Sometimes it means life happened. In the next video, I'm going to break down what hoarding disorder actually is and what it isn't, because clarity reduces shame. And shame has never helped anyone get organized. In the last video, we talked about how clutter isn't all the same. In this video, I want to slow down and talk specifically about hoarding disorder because it's often misunderstood and it's also deeply stigmatized. I once walked into a home where nearly every surface was covered, but what stood out to me wasn't the clutter. It was how protective the homeowner felt about the items. She didn't see junk, she saw safety, memories, possibility. And when gently asked about discarding something small, her body tensed, her breathing changed. There was real distress there. So that's important. Hoarding disorder is a clinical mental health diagnosis. It includes 3 primary components. First one is persistent difficulty discarding possessions regardless of value. Second is significant distress at the thought of getting rid of items. The third is accumulation that makes living spaces unusable for their intended purposes. This isn't about being messy. It isn't about laziness. It isn't solved by just cleaning. It's about emotional regulation and attachment. One of the biggest myths that you can fix hoarding disorder by clearing everything out. Forced cleaning without consent often damages trust, increases isolation, makes future hoarding worse. Because if the emotional root isn't addressed, the behavior returns. Treatment usually involves a licensed therapist trained in hoarding disorder, cognitive behavioral approaches, gradual exposure to discarding, collaborative organizing support. It should be slow, respectful, supported. If you're watching and thinking of someone you love, lead with compassion, not control. In the next video, we'll talk about chronic disorganization, which looks similar on the surface but feels very different inside. Now let's talk about chronic disorganization. This is where many high-functioning, capable women quietly live. I've worked with women who are successful in their careers, they manage teams, they care for families, they show up for everyone. And yet, their home feels like chaos. Not because they're emotionally attached to everything, because they feel behind all the time. They've tried new planners, apps, decluttering challenges, Sunday resets, and nothing seems to stick. That's chronic disorganization. Chronic disorganization typically includes long-term disorganization, significant impact on quality of life, and repeated failed self-help attempts to fix it. It's usually connected to ADHD, anxiety, depression, chronic illness, trauma, the person usually knows it's a problem. So they don't necessarily need awareness. They need systems that match how their brain works. Hoarding disorder says, I can't let this go. Chronic disorganization says, I don't know how to sustain this. The internal dialogue is the difference. In our final video, we'll talk about what actually helps because the solution depends entirely on the root. We've talked about the differences. Now let's talk about what actually helps. Because removing clutter is not the same thing as treating the cause. I've seen families rent dumpsters with good intentions. They thought if they could just clear the house, everything would be better. But without addressing the root issue, the clutter came back. Because clutter is often a symptom, not the problem itself. For hoarding disorder, treatment should be working with a licensed therapist, moving slowly, addressing emotional attachment, and using collaborative organizing support. When it comes to chronic disorganization, it focuses on sustainable systems, external structure and accountability, visual organization, simplified routines. The goal is not perfection, it's stability. If you see yourself in any of this, know that you're not broken, you are not lazy, and you are not beyond help. Clarity is powerful because when you understand the root, you can choose the right kind of support. If this resonated with you, please subscribe. If you're navigating chronic disorganization and want support building habits and systems that actually work for your brain, I share more about that in this channel.